Welcome to month 6 of our Botanica quilt block of the month. So I am so excited. This is the last month where we are going to do a block for our quilt, and then after that it's all about assembly. So we will have one more video in this series where we focus just on assembly and some quilting ideas. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and get started with the last block in this series. Okay, so this month we are doing the Indigenous Motifs block. So I want to show you on the quilt where that's at. These are located in the corners here, up there, to the left, and to the right, which is kind of behind the machine. You'll notice the way I did these is those three have those three fabrics, and opposite of the quilt, we use the same three fabrics. When we go up to the top, we use those three fabric colors, and then opposite, the same three. Now, hopefully you've kept your embroidery threads off to the side, because in general, we used a yellow, or a gold color, I should say, a blue, a green, and a pink fuchsia, like a darker pink. So if you look at our four corners, that is also going to show the four primary thread colors we used. The blue, the red, the green, and last but not least, that goldish yellow. Okay, so these stitch up very, very quickly. And how we get it incorporated into the quilt is a little bit different than all the others. So in this particular block, you can pick any size. They're all going to work for your quilt. They have three sizes. One's a 5 by 2.5, another is a 4 by 2, and another is a 3 by 1, or more like a 4 by 2. So how do you determine which one you need? Since I did the largest block you could do, I wanted to do the largest sashing that I could get on this quilt. So I used the largest triangle. But let's say you didn't want to have a very wide sashing on the sides and on the top. You can choose a smaller triangle to have less accents in your cornerstones. So even though I chose to do the largest size, I actually think it would still look good if you did one of the medium or the smaller sizes. This is one area where you get to determine which size applies to your project. So if you did most of these blocks in 5 by 7, they're going to be a lot smaller. You can choose to still do the largest triangle to have very bold sashing on the corners. Or if you wanted, and you wanted to have more of this kind of scale, where the blocks are significantly larger than our cornerstones, then you would choose the smallest triangle size to give more emphasis on your blocks. So just for reference, I picked the largest size block you could do all throughout the series. Those have to stay consistent, the same lettering every single month. But on this last month, you have some creative design. You do not have to stay with the same number. You get to decide how much you want of these cornerstones on each corner, how much of it you want it to be part of your quilted piece. If you ever have questions or you want to discuss it with me, you can always reach out. You can either type here in the comments or you can just call the store. I'd be more than happy to kind of give you some advice and guidance. But really, this is one of those creative points for you where you get to make the decision. Okay, so what we need to do is to get our supplies ready. We have the three opposite end fabrics and those three opposite end fabrics. The design that I did was I figured my blue and my green were my darker colors. My red and my yellow were my more vibrant colors. So I swapped it on the fabrics. I used vibrance with my darker threads. I used darks with my more vibrant threads. So you do not have to use the fabrics in the kit. We do provide you fabric. But if you have some scraps from a previous month and you're like, you know what, I really loved using this fabric, and I would prefer that my cornerstones would expo this fabric, please also do that as well. Or you may decide to just do them all in black. Again, that is your creative decision. But for now, this is how I did this, and these are the fabrics that will come in your kit. So let's get started. All right. So to get started, the first thing that I did is we got a square piece of batting, and all I did was cut it on the diagonal and cut it on the diagonal. I also had a large piece of black fabric, one large square. I went ahead and I cut it on the diagonal as well. So this was one square, and I just, cut it on diagonals all the way around. And now I have my fabrics. Here are my lighter, more vibrant fabrics. And they're just scrap pieces from previous months. And here are my darker ones. So I'm going to walk you through one corner. So I think what we're going to do is go ahead and do it with our darker fabrics. Now, if you remember, I did opposite. So if we're doing the darker fabrics, I used on mine the lighter threads, which for me was the gold and that fuchsia. And on the brighter fabrics, I used my darker threads, which were the green and the turquoise. So for this particular video, let's just go ahead and use the brightest color that I have, which is the gold, so that you can clearly see at home what we're doing. Now, the next thing I want to show you is over at the machine. All right, over here, what you can see is I have loaded up the largest triangle, because on my quilt, since I used a really large block size, I do want to have the largest triangle on my cornerstones. So one of the things you will notice is you have a lot of space on your hoop. So what I did is, instead of just doing one block at a time and doing it, I actually went ahead and loaded up multiples of it. So in one hooping, you can pretty much get done everything you need for one corner. So in this particular case, I can do for one corner the 3 blacks and the 3 colored fabrics. Okay, so let me show you what that's going to look like. Over here, for one corner, you do 3 with the stitching on top. You do 3 with the fabrics and the stitching on top. That is how one corner is put together. So that's the way I'm going to do it over here on my machine. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, even though I have all 6 loaded up, it will still be complete one, move on to the next. Complete one, move on to the next. Complete one, move on to the next. So there's still going to be a lot of removal of the hoops and everything. There are ways to skip around and get a lot done in one, but for sake of simplicity, I say go ahead and do one and complete it. Now, if you're one of my more advanced users, you may know you can skip ahead and maybe do all of that, where we're laying down all of the battings, and skip ahead to each one and then just get that one step done, start back at the beginning, and then work on your next step. That is a tip only for my advanced machine embroidery users. If you feel comfortable hopping around, I absolutely recommend it. And I'll be honest, that's the way I did it at home as well. And I was able to finish all 6 at a single time. But if you're one of my newer users on your embroidery machine, just going ahead and follow the sequence where you finish all of one triangle, then it starts the next, then it starts the next. You'll be moving your hoop in and out quite a bit, but it's a lot easier to do it that way than if you have to learn a new skill of how to hop around in your design. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to get one of these triangles done. So I'm going to go back to the beginning since I did hop around a little. And as I've told you in other classes, I use neon thread because I want you to see what I'm doing very clearly. If you see here some X's at home, that is strictly because I was putting two pieces of stabilizer together, and I was too lazy to take it to the sewing machine, so I did it on the embroidery machine. You don't need to be doing that. That was just me being lazy and using my embroidery machine to sew for me. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start with the first triangle, and as we have been doing every single month, this very first triangle is simply to tell you where to lay down the batting. And just as I've done in previous months, and I will get out of the way in a second, I try to get it as close as I can to those lines so I have a minimal amount of cutting to do. So this second one is attaching the batting to the stabilizer. Well, I didn't do too well. I'm going to have to trim all three sides. But either way, you'll get better at this. But look at how much batting I have left over. I can still get another square even though we're using, I can still get another triangle even though we have 6 triangles on here. The 4 triangles I made up are going to be plenty big enough. All right, so I've trimmed away all of the excess batting. Now, here's something that you can't forget. When you put this on, don't forget all 3 of these sides will be exposed, so you're going to need at least ½ inch of extra fabric all the way around. So just make sure you make a piece that is much larger than the triangle underneath, because you will be trimming away and keeping ½ inch just like you have on all of the other blocks. Okay, so I'm going to take this over to here. I'm going to cut away and make sure I'm leaving at a bare minimum ½ inch. Now, when we're done with all of these triangles, of course, we'll go to the cutting table and we're going to go ahead and cut off literally down to the ½ inch. But for now, I'm going to rough cut knowing I'm giving myself at least an inch extra. So I know I'm good to go. I'm going to take it back. Now at this point, it is very important you remember, and just so you know, I did not use neon, but for everything. But this is where you would change your embroidery thread. So when I was doing this, what I actually did was, of course, I'm showing you on neon. I used the color I had even for tacking down the batting and everything. So in this case, I'm going to load up the gold thread, and I would have done the entire thing using gold. So again, I had to change threads just because I was using the neon so you guys could see. But when I did it at home, everything was just done in gold, including the tacking down of the batting and everything. But now we're officially doing the top stitching, so I had to make sure instead of the neon, we had to go to the gold. So normally at this point we would go and we would unhoop and we'd be done with the block. But remember, this is more about quantity of these cornerstones. So what I did is I simply folded back the previous one so it doesn't get in the way. And now, if you remember, at this point, if you are kind of new at machine embroidery, go ahead and just work your way through each and every one. But for my more advanced students, what I did here is I did this level, the showing me where the batting goes, for all of them, and then I went back and tacked down for all of them. It just saved me a little time of going back and forth between my machine and the hooping to cut away excesses. So this one, I would now start on the next one instead of the sequence that was here. Again, this is a technique for my more advanced machine embroidery users. If you don't feel comfortable doing this, I would recommend you not. Okay, so I have finished all of my triangles and now I'm ready to cut out everything. So if you have followed my advice and you've done them all in a single hooping, of which I can't see them, there we go. The first thing I would recommend that you do is, I'm actually going to turn this around and very carefully, without getting any fabric, going to, and that's the part I'm checking. You see me kind of peeking underneath. I don't want to clip my fabric. If anything, I'm not even going to do that. I'm going to literally tear away because I prefer to tear my stabilizer than to cut into my fabric and have to redo that. I'm going to come over here and get to the next one. Now remember I said this was just for me to tack together some stabilizers. So no, yours will not have a bunch of X's on the back like I have here. So just ignore that. And so now I have 1 triangle, 2 triangle, 3 triangle. I'm going to come over here, tear my stabilizer, 4 triangle, 5 triangle, and 6. So now that I've done that, let's look at my first triangle. Remember, we have to have a 1/2 inch on each side because this is an outer edge. So I'm going to take that, cut that. Then I'm going to do the other edge. All right. And then just like we've done every other month, I would highly recommend, you don't have to, but I highly recommend taking the time to take off all that stabilizer from the back. I would even take the time to come in and take out all of this right here. And of course, this is optional. You don't have to do it. It will eventually wash away from inside your quilt. But I just have found it gives my quilt a little bit more of a quilty feel that I am used to whenever I'm using traditional techniques. So it is just that little extra. And as I've shown you in different videos, you can always use your curved awl to kind of pick it out and just kind of get that line started. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and trim down all of my others. So I'll check back with you in just 1 second. All right, so I've trimmed everything out. All of my edges have a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around. So this month, instead of having 1 block you're working on, you're actually repeating and creating 6 blocks to create 1 cornerstone. So in this case, we're going to do 3 blacks, 3 colors. We have a dark set and we have a light set, and every one of the corners will be using a different embroidery thread. They should be the same colors you used in the quilt as your primary colors. In this example, I'm using the gold for this cornerstone set. Then I'll be doing the same thing in this color. I'll be repeating this process with 3 new fabrics for the teal and then 3 new fabrics plus this set for the green. In the end, this month, you are doing a total of, let's see, 6 times 4, 24 of these triangles. All right, so that's the final video for the building of the blocks. We're going to meet one more time in the next week, and what we will be focusing on is actually has nothing to do with the embroidery machine, but how we're going to use our sewing machine to get all of this together. And namely, we're also going to figure out how we do the final sashes with our black fabric. And once we've done that, you will have your quilt top officially done, and we can talk about some different ways to quilt this. See you next time.